in terms of coming up with work-related issues?
Mm-hmm.
And how about you personally, though? You know, do you have a stuffed animal panda collection, or a girlfriend who loves pandas, or anything at all that makes pandas stick out to you personally?
Objection, compound. That was maybe 5 questions.
Is there anything in particular about pandas that was special to you personally immediately before you conceived of the idea for Kung Fu Pandas?
Personally, no.
You mentioned that in animated films there was at that time perhaps an interest in an idea that would involve an animal that hadn't yet been done or hadn't been done that often. Did I get that right?
Yes.
What other, I take it a panda fell within that category in your mind?
Yes.
And what other examples of animals would fall within that category at that point in time?
Kangaroos. Monkeys. Seals. Certain types of fish. Bears. Not panda bears, but black bears, brown bears. Birds. Cheetahs. Do you need more? It's a lot of animals out there.
I take it you're saying there are more, but you've given a number of them. Fair enough.
Some you probably haven't even heard of.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you again the date that you conceived of the idea, and see if we can get it a little bit more specifically stated. Is there an event or a document or any sort of recollection that ties into the conception of the idea?
Well, there is a document that was produced by one of our in-house writers named Rafe Beck, who I worked with and supervised. And one of the ideas in that document, or I should say that that document was about potential ideas for movies about a panda. One of those ideas was about a panda who did martial arts.
And is that the date that you came up with your idea for Kung Fu Panda, the date that you saw that written article or whatever document you called it?
I don't know.
Let me ask it this way. Precisely what was your idea?
What was my idea?
Right.
To do a movie set in China in which the lead character was a panda who performed kung fu in order to defend his village.
Okay. So we know the earliest date you could have come up with this idea was the date in which you received a copy of Rafe Beck's document, correct?
Objection, misstates testimony, and unintelligible.
We don't know that that's the earliest date.
Okay. When you mentioned Mr. Beck's writing,
Yes.
wasn't that to tell me when you came up with the idea?
Objection, misstates testimony.
I'm asking.
You asked me for a document. That is a document.
Okay. All right, so was your idea conceived of before or after that document authored by Mr. Beck?
I believe it was before.
You're not sure?
I'm not sure.
To the best of your recollection, how much before?
I don't know.
Do you think it was a year before or a week before? Any estimate whatsoever?
Less than a year?
Okay. So, is it fair to say it wasn't reading Mr. Beck's document that caused you to come up with the idea?
You're asking me, was it reading his idea? I'm sorry, restate the question.
I'll rephrase it.
Okay.
I'm still trying to figure out the date,
Okay.
and I'm specifically asking you now whether there's anything that sticks out in your mind as to what caused you to come up with this idea.
It was not Rafe Beck's document.
Okay. Okay. So, to the best of your recollection, you came up with this idea prior to seeing Rafe Beck's document, correct?
Yes, I think so.
And to the best of your recollection, was there any document you had looked at that led you to come up with this idea?
Well, in development, we often have lists of countries, animals, arenas. Arenas is another way of saying locations. And on these lists would be countries that we were interested in, or countries that had never been done before. Same goes for animals, animals that hadn't been done in movies, or animals that we were interested in. And oftentimes these lists would be sometimes on the same piece of paper. So, China was something that, we were considering, because there had not been an animated film set in China up until that point, as far as I know. Certainly not in computer-generated animation. And the same goes for pandas. So I believe that both of those things would have been on the list, China and pandas, as well as we had lists of genres.
Okay. So
and Kung Fu would have been part of that, martial arts.
So it's your testimony that the inspiration for your idea was general categories of locations, animals, and concepts. Is that right?
Objection, misstates testimony as to inspiration.
You feel free to correct me if I ever misstate your testimony. It's not my intent.
Yes, the inspiration for, an idea like Kung Fu Panda would have originated most likely in one of those lists.
If there were any personal experiences, well, withdrawn, let me ask it this way. Were there any personal experiences you drew from when you conceived of your idea that became Kung Fu Panda?
Personal experiences?
Yes.
Of what nature?
Well, I would imagine of any nature, but perhaps of a nature involving Kung Fu or pandas or China. I'm just asking because if so, I'd like you to explain to me what they are.
Personal experiences?
Yes.
No.
was your idea that you conceived of
Right.
based on any personal experiences of yours?
No.
We'll stipulate the Kung Fu Panda is not his life story.
Now, what is it about your idea that made it unique?
What made it unique?
Yes.
There had never been an animated film about it before.
About what?
About a Kung Fu Panda, as far as I know.
And that was your idea, to have an animated film about a Kung Fu Panda, correct?
Yes.
You mentioned a document created by Mr. Beck. Was that a document that you had asked him to prepare?
Yes.
What did you ask him to prepare in that regard?
Well, in my best estimation, I had told him that we were interested in doing an animated film about pandas set in China. I would have also asked him to consider a variety of what we call templates. And by template, I mean literature, public domain stories, previous films to use as inspiration, Shakespeare, as a guide for figuring out a story about a panda in China. And that could have included martial arts films, because the most well-known genre, at least I think to the general layperson in China, is the martial arts genre. So it is not a stretch to say that perhaps there is a panda story that could exist within that genre.
When did Mr. Beck work for you?
In 2000?
And what was his position?
He was hired to be a staff writer, to work on ideas that we would ask him to flesh out.
Who hired him?
Lance Young and myself hired him.
Is a staff writer a full-time position or a project-by-project position?
It was a full-time position.
Who did Mr. Beck report to?
Me.
Only you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
Is that true of the entire time that Mr. Beck worked there?
Yes.
Was any part of Mr. Beck's job function to come up with ideas in the way that you did?
Could you be more specific?
I could try. Was it part of his job function to try to come up with an idea that would become a movie?
Based on direction from me.
So his role was to follow your direction, correct?
Yes.
And why was Mr. Beck there for a short period of time, if you know?
It was something that we were going to try out. I think we may have had him for 6 months or thereabouts. We ultimately didn't find enough value for it, for the program to continue, so we discontinued it.
When you say the program, was this like an internship program?
We hired 3 staff writers.
Were they
Rafe Beck was one.
Okay.
They were all part of this program.
Was it an internship program?
No. They were not interns.
Thank you. What experience did Mr. Beck have before he was hired by Dreamworks?
I don't remember.
Do you know if he had writing experience before, or if this was more of a first-time position?
Everybody who submitted to the program as a potential employee gave us a writing sample so we could see if they could write.
But other than looking at his writing sample, do you know if he had written anything that was published, for instance?
Published?
Anywhere?
Not that I know of.
Do you know if he had worked for any other company before he worked for Dreamworks?
I don't remember.
Was it your sense he was kind of a newbie?
Yes.
And I take it from a prior answer, you didn't feel it worked out so well with him?
Objection misstates testimony as to Mr. Beck.
You can answer.
We decided to discontinue the program, so all 3 writers that we hired were let go.
Prior to the idea that you just described to us, was there already a pre-existing idea for Kung Fu Panda?
Which idea did I just describe to you that you're referring to?
I apologize. I had asked you what your idea was that you conceived of that became Kung Fu Panda. And throughout this deposition, I might be referring back to that. So if I use the term your idea, will you understand me from this point forward to mean the idea you conceived of that became Kung Fu Panda?
If it's the same idea that I'm thinking of, then yes.
Tell me the idea you're thinking of.
About a animated film that takes place in China, in which the lead character is a panda who does martial arts in order to save his village.
I want a term that you're comfortable with. Do you want me to call it your Kung Fu Panda idea?
Sure.
Okay. So for the rest of this deposition, when I use the phrase Kung Fu Panda idea, that's what we'll be referring to. Fair enough?
My Kung Fu Panda idea,
Yes.
not just Kung Fu Panda idea in general.
Why don't I include that? I'll say your Kung Fu Panda
Okay.
idea. Which is pretty creative. Had you ever before heard of a Kung Fu Panda before your Kung Fu Panda idea?
No.
At any point, did your Kung Fu Panda idea, withdraw that,